Allow yourself to sink into the quiet. Let the day's noise recede like a tide, and picture, if you will, a small town nestled in the hills of Vermont. The air smells of pine needles and wood smoke. On a street named Maple Lane, there stands a white clapboard cottage with a deep porch, its eaves draped in winter's first delicate frost. In the front window, a single lamp glows golden against the early dusk. This is the home of Margaret Finch. She is 70 years young, a woman whose life has been measured in the quiet turning of pages. For 40 years, she was the heart of the Willow Creek Public Library. Now retired, her world has settled into a gentle rhythm of solitude. Each morning, precisely at 6, she rises. The house is still, filled only with the memories of her late husband, Arthur. She fills a kettle, and while it sings, she takes a chipped ceramic mug from the shelf, a mug that reads, "World's Okayest Librarian," a joke gift from Arthur that became a cherished relic. She carries her tea to the window, watching the dawn blush the sky over her snow-dusted garden. Her husband's hydrangeas, now just skeletal bundles of twigs, sleep peacefully beneath a white blanket. This ritual, this quiet communion with the past, is her anchor. Her life is small, orderly, and tinged with a loneliness she has learned to bear. Her only daughter, Claire, lives an hour away in bustling Burlington, but the distance between them feels continental. Margaret's love for Claire is the defining melody of her life. To give her daughter opportunities, Margaret worked nights typing manuscripts, weekends selling her intricate knitwear at local markets, and spent years budgeting with monastic strictness. She watched with a heart full to bursting as Claire, bright and beautiful, left for college. She believed the unspoken contract of motherhood. Sacrifice begets love, which begets gratitude, which begets companionship in later years. How naive that belief now seems. Claire married Derek Harding 5 years ago. From their first meeting, a chill settled in Margaret's bones. Derek was all polished surface, expensive watch, impeccable suit, a smile that never warmed his eyes. He spoke of asset portfolios and market trends over Margaret's lovingly prepared pot roast, his gaze subtly critiquing the worn furniture, the outdated wallpaper Arthur had chosen. But Claire glowed under his attention, and so Margaret bit her tongue, folded her hands, and welcomed him. After Arthur's quiet passing from a sudden heart attack 2 years later, the fabric of Margaret's life unraveled. Grief was expected. The coldness from her daughter was not. Claire's calls grew brief, logistical. Did you pay the property tax? The gutters need cleaning. Her visits, once monthly, became quarterly, then rare. They were performances of duty, a hurried lunch, a glance at her watch, a new brochure for a senior living community left casually on the table. Derek's presence was a silent pressure, his eyes constantly evaluating the cottage's potential. The fracture became a chasm on a Tuesday in late November. The sky was the color of old pewter. Margaret, clinging to the hope of connection, had spent the day preparing. The cottage was warm, fragrant with the scent of Claire's childhood favorite, cinnamon apple cake, and a rich herb-roasted chicken. She'd set the table with her mother's linen and the good silver, polished to a soft gleam. Derek entered without knocking, as was his habit. He shrugged off his cashmere coat, handed it to Margaret as if she were a concierge, and sank into Arthur's favorite wingback chair by the fireplace. He picked up the television remote. "Don't, Claire, tell her," he said, without preamble, his eyes on a financial news channel. Claire stood in the doorway, beautiful and alien in a sharp black pantsuit. "Mother," she began, her voice unnaturally formal, "we need to discuss your living situation." The words, "your living situation," turned Margaret's home into a problem. Claire laid out the argument with detached precision. The stairs were a fall risk, the yard was too large to manage, the isolation was unhealthy. They had found an ideal solution, the Gables at Shelburne, a senior community with meal plans, social activities, and on-site medical care. "It's a lovely place, Mother. You'd have people your own age to talk to." Margaret's world tilted. "Claire, this is my home. Your father and I, every memory." "Memories aren't bricks and mortar," Claire interrupted, parroting a line she was sure originated with Derek. "They're in here." She tapped her temple, not her heart. The gesture was chilling. Derek muted the TV. "Be reasonable," Derek sighed, the patience in his voice a thin veneer over steel. "We've already consulted with an elder law attorney. The paperwork for a transfer of deed, for your own protection, is quite straightforward." Transfer, not sale. They weren't just putting her out, they were taking title. A cold terror sharper than grief seized her. I need to think," she managed, her voice a frail thread. "There's nothing to think about," Claire said, standing. "The appraiser is coming Thursday. Start thinking about what you really want to keep. The unit at the Gables is quite compact." They left. The roasted chicken sat untouched, its skin crisping to leather. The cake wept condensation under its glass dome. Margaret sat at the perfectly set table for a long time, listening to the empty house creak, feeling the foundations of her life crack and crumble. The invasion began in earnest. The appraiser, a young man with a laser measure, clicked his tongue at the vintage kitchen and the unpermitted sunroom Arthur had built. Derek followed him like a shadow, talking about open concept potential and granite tops.
A week later, Claire arrived with color brochures. "Look, Mother, watercolor classes on Tuesdays." Her enthusiasm was a grotesque pantomime. Then came the boxes. Claire began helping her pack, her decisions swift and ruthless. A vase from Margaret's wedding reception? Too fragile for the new place. Arthur's collection of leather-bound histories? So dusty and so heavy. They went into the donate pile. The final confrontation was a staged intervention. Derek arrived with his friend, a slick attorney named Robert, who spoke in a soothing, condescending baritone. He slid a stack of documents across the kitchen table. "Just a few signatures, Margaret. We're setting up a conservatorship to manage your affairs, for your safety." Margaret stared at the words. Petition for guardianship. Affidavit of incapacity. "I am not incapable," she said, her hands trembling in her lap. "Mother, last week you left the tea kettle on until it boiled dry," Claire said, her eyes not meeting Margaret's. It was a lie. A bald, calculated lie. Margaret saw Derek's slight, satisfied nod. "If you don't sign voluntarily," Robert said gently, "the court may need to be petitioned. That can be stressful, public." The threat was naked. "Sign over your home and your freedom, or we will drag you through court and have you declared a senile old woman." The loneliness that had been her companion transformed into a yawning, terrifying abyss. She was utterly alone, outmaneuvered, powerless. After they left, promising to return Monday for her decision, Margaret did not cry. She sat in the deepening dark, a statue of despair. She considered the unthinkable, surrender. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps she was just a foolish old woman clinging to ghosts. But then, as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, they fell upon Arthur's old roll-top desk in the corner. The walnut was scarred and stained, a faithful companion through his engineering projects and her lesson plans. A memory surfaced, clear and sudden. The week before he died, Arthur had been unusually solemn. He'd taken her hand and said, "Maggie, if the wolves ever circle, remember my toolbox is in the bottom drawer. The combination is your birthday backwards." She had thought he was speaking metaphorically, his mind perhaps clouded by medication. Now, with a heart pounding against her ribs, she went to the desk. She knelt on the creaky floorboards and pulled open the deep bottom drawer. It was filled with old blueprints and drafting tools. She felt along the back. Her fingers found a small, recessed metal panel. In its center was a combination lock, tiny and almost invisible against the wood. Her birthday, October 9th, 1953, 10953. Backwards, 359010. With trembling fingers, she dialed the numbers. There was a soft, oiled click. The panel swung open. Inside was not a toolbox, but a slim, leather-bound ledger, the kind Arthur used for his most important calculations. Tied around it with a black ribbon was a sealed envelope with her name in his handwriting. Beneath it lay a thick sheaf of legal documents. She took the ledger and the envelope to the kitchen table, under the warm pool of light from the overhead lamp. She opened the envelope first. "My dearest Maggie, if you are reading this, the wolves are at the door, and I am not there to stand beside you. Forgive the melodrama, but forgive the secrecy more. I could not bear the thought of this knowledge burdening you before its time, or worse, drawing the wrong kind of attention from those who might see you only as a keeper of a vault. For 35 years, beside my salary, I worked as a silent consultant. I helped design bridges in developing nations, filtration systems for drought-stricken regions. The fees were substantial, but showing that wealth would have changed our simple life, perhaps even changed Claire. So I invested in land, in quiet companies run by good people, in the future of this town we love. The ledger contains the truth. You are, my love, a very wealthy woman. The cottage is the least of it. I've left instructions with a law firm in Boston, Fitzgerald and Hale. Their card is paper-clipped to page 1. They know everything and await only your call. Everything is yours, solely and absolutely. There is one specific provision regarding Claire. She is our daughter, and I love her, but I saw in Derek a hunger that frightens me. Her inheritance is held in a trust, dispersing only if she demonstrates, in the judgment of you and the trustees, genuine care and respect for you. If that man has turned her heart to stone, then you have the power to protect yourself and perhaps to save her from him. Do not be afraid of this power. Use it as you have used everything in your life, with wisdom, with grace, and with an unwavering sense of what is right. You are the strongest person I have ever known. All my love, across all the stars, Arthur." Tears fell now, hot and cleansing, spotting the fine paper. They were not tears of weakness, but of awe, of love resurrected. She opened the ledger. It was meticulously organized. Deeds to commercial properties in Burlington, a portfolio of stock in stable, dividend-paying companies, ownership records for a small, profitable hydroelectric plant on the river north of town, and then the entry that made her breath catch. Property 1717 Chestnut Street, Burlington, 6-unit brownstone. Current tenant C. Harding. They were living in a building she owned. Their monthly rent was being auto-deposited into an account at a private bank in Boston. She flipped to the bank statements. The balances were numbers she associated with national debt, not personal savings. For a long time, she just sat, holding the proof of Arthur's profound, secret devotion. The fear that had paralyzed her evaporated, burned away by a rising, quiet fury. They thought her a helpless old woman to be managed. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The librarian knew how to research. The mother knew her child's heart was not entirely lost. The widow now held the deeds to their world. The following Monday dawned bright and brittle. Margaret, dressed with care in a forest green wool dress, fastened Arthur's pearls around her neck and applied a faint touch of lipstick. She was not packing. She was preparing for a meeting.
At 10 a.m., Derek's black SUV crunched up the drive. He and Claire entered without knocking, followed by 2 burly movers in coveralls. "All set, Margaret?" Derek asked, his voice falsely cheerful. "The van's here." Margaret sat in her armchair, a cup of tea in hand.
I've decided not to move." Claire sighed in exasperation. "Mother, we've been over this." "No," Margaret said, her voice clear and firm. "You have talked at me. Now I will talk and you will listen." She placed her teacup on the side table with a definitive click. "Sit down." Something in her tone commanded obedience, even from Derek. They sat on the sofa, perplexed. "Firstly," Margaret began, "you will cease all packing immediately. You will return every item you have taken from this house, including my mother's locket and my wedding band, which are currently in the zippered compartment of your purse, Claire." Claire's hand flew to her bag, her face flushing crimson. "Secondly, the appraisals, the brochures, the talk of conservatorships, it ends now. You are not moving me to the Gables. You are not taking my home." Derek found his voice, laced with condescension. "Margaret, this is delusional. You're not well. We're trying to help you." "The only help I need," Margaret said, reaching for the ledger on the table beside her, "is understanding why my daughter and her husband have been paying rent to me for the past 2 years without my knowledge." She opened the ledger to the relevant page and slid it across the coffee table. Derek snatched it up. His eyes scanned the lines, his face progressing from confusion to disbelief to a sickly ashen gray. Claire leaned over, her brow furrowed. 1717 Chestnut. That's our address," she whispered. "Correct. Owned by A. Finch Trust. Your landlord, Burlington Property Management, is a shell company that forwards your payments to a bank in Boston. My bank." This is a forgery," Derek stammered, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. "I encourage you to verify it. Call your property manager, call the county clerk. In the meantime, consider this your official 30-day notice to vacate my property." "You can't do that," Derek exploded, leaping to his feet. "I can, and I have," Margaret replied, unmoved. "The notice will be formally delivered by Fitzgerald and Hale, my attorneys, tomorrow. I suggest you start looking for a new apartment, one you can actually afford on your salary, which, by the way, may be in jeopardy. Arthur held a significant non-voting stake in Harding and Partners. I believe the board will be very interested in an ethical review of a partner attempting to defraud his elderly mother-in-law." The room was silent, save for the ragged sound of Derek's breathing. Claire stared at her mother as if seeing her for the first time, not as a fading relic, but as a sovereign power. "Mom," Claire breathed, the word a plea and a question. "All these months, Claire," Margaret said, her voice softening only a fraction. "The lies about the stove, the threats of court, the coldness. Was it worth it? For a man who sees you and everyone around you as assets to be leveraged." Claire's facade shattered. Sobs shook her shoulders. He said you were a drain, that you'd squander the equity, that we needed it for our future family. He said you'd never understand." "And you believed him," Margaret stated, not as a question. Derek, seeing his control evaporate, turned on Claire. "You weak, sentimental fool, this is what comes of listening to you." The venom in his voice finally broke the last of Claire's trance. "Get out," she said to him, her voice low and steady. "What?" "Get out of my mother's house, and get out of my life." A brutal 5-minute argument ensued, ending with Derek storming out, vowing legal warfare. The movers, bewildered, followed. And then Margaret was alone with her weeping daughter. She did not offer comfort immediately. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. "You may stay here tonight," Margaret said finally, "in your old room. We will talk tomorrow." The weeks that followed were a fragile, exhausting dance. Claire, pregnant and shell-shocked, moved back into her childhood bedroom. Margaret maintained a polite but firm distance. She observed. Claire, free from Derek's influence, began to revert, helping with dishes without being asked, taking walks, crying often, but now with what seemed like genuine remorse rather than manipulative pity. Margaret contacted Fitzgerald and Hale. The firm, as Arthur promised, was expecting her. A fierce, elegant attorney named Victoria Chen took charge, her respect for Arthur evident. She confirmed everything and began the legal process of formally asserting Margaret's control over her assets. Derek, as predicted, fought back. He filed for divorce, and most cruelly for full custody of the unborn child, alleging that Claire was mentally unstable and under the toxic influence of her wealthy, manipulative mother. The courtroom in Burlington was a stark, modern space, all pale wood and harsh light. On the day of the preliminary hearing, Margaret wore a navy suit, her posture straight, Arthur's pearls a silent talisman. Claire, pale and clutching her stomach, clung to her arm. Derek sat across the aisle with his lawyer, shooting them glances of pure contempt. The judge entered, the Honorable David Alastair. He was in his late 60s, with a stern, intelligent face and a thatch of white hair. He settled into his chair, reviewed a file, then looked out over the courtroom. His gaze swept past Margaret, then snapped back. He leaned forward, peering over his glasses. "Counsel," he interrupted the clerk, his voice deep and resonant. "Before we begin, is that Margaret Finch, the Margaret Finch from Willow Creek?" Every head turned. Margaret's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Alastair's stern expression melted into one of profound astonishment. "Margaret, my God, you haven't changed a bit." He removed his glasses. "Do you remember me? David Alastair. You saved my academic life, and probably my actual life, in 1978. A memory, dusty and distant, clicked into place. A tall, painfully shy, brilliantly angry teenager, always hiding in the back stacks of her library, reading Kant and getting into fights.
"David," she breathed. "The boy with the busted knuckles and the copy of Thus Spoke Zarathustra?" A genuine smile broke across the judge's face. "You'd wipe my knuckles with a damp paper towel from the staff bathroom and tell me philosophy was a better weapon than my fists. You got me into that summer program at Dartmouth. It changed my trajectory completely." He shook his head, marveling. "I became a lawyer because of the books you put in my hands. I sought this bench because of the justice you talked about, the kind that protects the quiet and the kind." Derek's lawyer shot up. "Your Honor, this is a highly irregular and prejudicial." "It is a moment of profound human connection, Counselor," Judge Alastair said, his voice turning to ice, "which, in my courtroom, is never irregular. And it reminds me that cases are about people, not just motions." He looked back at Margaret, his eyes soft. "Mrs. Finch, it is an honor to see you again, though I wish it were in happier circumstances." He then turned his attention to the file before him, his demeanor once more that of a judge, but now with a focused intensity. He listened to Derek's lawyer paint a picture of an unstable Claire and a domineering Margaret. He listened as Victoria Chen presented her counter-evidence, affidavits from neighbors about Derek's aggression, financial records showing his attempt to coerce the property transfer, a psychologist's assessment of Claire describing the clear patterns of coercive control she'd been under. Judge Alastair's questions to Derek were pinpoint and devastating. "Mr. Harding, you petitioned for guardianship over Mrs. Finch based on claims of cognitive decline, yet she seems to have outmaneuvered you financially and legally at every turn. Can you explain that?" She had help, Your Honor. Lawyers. Competent individuals seeking legal counsel is not evidence of incapacity, it is evidence of prudence." He steepled his fingers. "This court finds the petitioner's claims regarding Mrs. Finch's influence to be not only unsupported, but disingenuous. The petition for exclusive custody is denied. Parental rights will be shared with primary physical custody to Miss Harding and supervised visitation for Mr. Harding pending completion of a comprehensive psychological evaluation and anger management program. Furthermore, given the evidence of attempted financial exploitation, all marital assets are frozen pending the divorce proceedings, with a forensic accountant to be appointed by the court." The gavel fell.
It was over. Final section. Slow, reflective, healing. 5 years later. The cottage on Maple Lane is no longer a place of lonely echoes. The garden is vibrant, restored under Margaret's care, and now the delight of a small, curious person named Ilara. At 4, she has Claire's dark curls and Arthur's thoughtful, observant eyes. She spends afternoons helping her grandmother weed the flower beds, her conversations a delightful, earnest stream of consciousness. Claire lives in the renovated apartment above the old garage, close but independent. The experience hollowed her out, but she has rebuilt herself stronger, more authentic. She went back to school, became a social worker, specializing in elder advocacy, using her painful past to protect others. Her relationship with Margaret was painstakingly rebuilt, brick by brick, apology by consistent action. Trust, once broken, is a fragile vase. It can be repaired, but the hairline cracks remain, a permanent reminder. Their love now is deeper, more honest, and fiercely protective. Margaret's life expanded in ways she never imagined. The Finch Foundation, headquartered in a beautifully restored historic building in downtown Burlington, provides legal aid, safe housing, and financial literacy programs for older adults facing exploitation. Its board includes Victoria Chen and, to Margaret's ongoing amusement, Judge David Allister, retired, who volunteers as a mediator. One crisp autumn evening, Margaret sits on the porch swing, a wool blanket over her knees. Ilara is curled beside her, half asleep, clutching a well-loved rabbit. "Grandma," murmurs Ilara, "tell me the story about the secret book." Again? Margaret feigns exhaustion, but she is already beginning. "Once upon a time, there was a very wise man who loved his family more than anything in the world. He knew that the best gifts aren't always the shiniest ones, but the ones that are strong and true, like a shield or a key. So he wrote all his love and all his cleverness into a special book, and he hid it away." As she speaks, she looks out over her garden, now glowing in the twilight. The hydrangeas Arthur loved are full and blue. She thinks of the ledger, now safely in a vault, not as a symbol of wealth, but a testament to a quiet, abiding love that transcended death. She thinks of Claire inside, humming as she prepares dinner. She thinks of the women at the foundation who now have their own keys, their own security. The victory was never in the courtroom drama, nor in the stunned look on Derek's face. It was in the reclaiming of her own narrative. It was in learning that her strength, the quiet, persistent, nurturing strength of a librarian, a mother, a widow, was a force more powerful than any greed or aggression. Arthur hadn't just left her money, he had left her a mirror, reminding her who she truly was when the world tried to define her as frail and obsolete. Ilara's breathing evens out into sleep. Claire steps on the porch, handing Margaret a fresh cup of tea in the chipped, world's okayest librarian mug. "She only ever wants your stories," smiles Claire, tucking the blanket around her daughter. "She has excellent taste," whispers Margaret, taking the warm mug. Her fingers brush Claire's. It is a simple contact, but it speaks of hard-won peace. Margaret Finch sips her tea. The story of the secret book is just a fairy tale for her granddaughter. The true story of love that hid like a seed in winter, of dignity that refused to be uprooted, of a quiet woman who discovered she was, and always had been, the heroine of her own life. That story is written in the lines on her face, in the safety of her home, and in the legacy of protection she now cultivates. It is a story with a good ending, not because it ended without pain, but because the pain was transformed into something sturdy, beautiful, and enduring. And as the first star appears in the violet sky over Vermont, that is more than enough. So, remember as you drift into dreams that within you lies a story still unfolding. Your quiet strengths, your patience, your observation, your resilience are your hidden ledgers, your silent armor. You are the author, the guardian, and the heir to your own dignity. Sleep now, wrapped in the knowledge that even the gentlest spirit can move mountains when love and truth are its compass. Rest well. Good night.